I often said that the first $100,000 you have to save is not only the hardest, but it's also the most important because of the compounding effect it can have over time. It's stated that the average American under 35 only has about $3,200 in savings, which is way far away from that $100,000 we need to experience that compound growth. My name is Nabil Khan, and I was able to save just over $400,000 at 25 years old, and was able to save my first $100,000 at 23, despite not making anywhere close to six figures at the time. I actually even started with a negative net worth because I was in debt, and I've got a few simple principles that I was able to use that will help you gain your first 100,000 and more. First step is to get on a basic budget and understand where your money is going. If you're anything like I was, you might be just starting out on your financial journey. You either don't have your first full-time job or maybe you just landed it and you're trying to learn some basic principles. Like I said, I actually started out with a negative net worth because I had some student debt at the time that I needed to pay down. I didn't have a strong sense of any financial understanding. I wanted to learn, and so I had to get some of the basics. When I graduated college, I had a job at Amazon as a warehouse manager, making about $50,000 a year. This wasn't any amazing salary, but it's something I was definitely very happy with. Early on, the most important step you can do is just getting a basic budget down. Exactly how much is flowing into your pocket every month and where it's going. I use an app called Credit Karma, which used to be Mint Mobile, in order to track all of my finances. I'm going to attach a simple budget breakdown that will show you what sort of money you should be spending on each of the respective categories, like food, housing, etc. When you have that down, you want to sort of look at what the big movers are for your budget. Maybe you're spending a lot on car payments, maybe you're spending a lot on food, maybe you're spending a lot on going out, etc. You first want to focus on the big things that you can change. Let's say you can decrease your living expenses and move to an apartment that's a little bit less expensive. Once you've nailed the big items, you move down to the little things to see what you can kind of save some extra cash on. I'm not going to be the person that tells you that saving on your coffee every day is the reason that you can't buy a house. But the reality is, if you're spending a decent amount of money on eating out or subscriptions, this can actually easily total to a couple $100s a month, which is exactly what you need to start building a foundation. Once you have narrowed down some of the expenses you can get rid of, I use some pretty simple principles to show how I save money. When I was just starting out, I used Dave Ramsey's baby steps 1 through 4 to really help me. The first one is to focus on saving just $1,000. If you have a bunch of debt, the next step is to list those out smallest to largest and start paying them in that order. You want to tackle the smallest ones first so you get that positive progress and keep moving your way up the list. Now, the reality is, if you're working a blue-collar job, kind of like I was, to make more money and get yourself some breathing room, you might need to just work more hours. Brendan Carter tells a story of how he worked about 12 hours a day, almost 7 days a week, for 2 years in order to make six figures each year. He was able to use this to pay down debt, generate some savings that eventually enabled him to build his business and move on to do bigger things. Third baby step is to focus on getting 3 to 6 months of expenses down. Really, if you're in your 20s, you either don't have a very high cost of living or you found some things that you can cut down. This is the one time in your life that you can afford to technically be broke and not live a nice lifestyle. If you're in your early 20s, you might not have things like a wife or a husband or kids or any of those large responsibilities that cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars a month. And so this is your time to just stack up whatever money you have. Even to this day, I actually still only have $10,000 in actual emergency savings and just invest the rest because I don't need a lot day to day. The fourth and final baby step that we'll cover from Dave Ramsey is to invest 15% of your income into retirement. This seems like a pretty decent amount on paper, but the reality is, if you're in your 20s and you have low expenses, you might be able to save a lot more. I've met a ton of people who are able to save 40, 50, or even more of their income. When I was just starting out at work and I was making about $50,000 base salary, I was still able to save about 50% of my salary, and through the rest of the video, I'll give you some tips that show you how to do this. The second big idea is to learn skills that increase your income. Let's say at this point you've gone through a full budget and you've seen that there's no way for you to save more money. You might be right actually, and you might just need to make more money. If you're working a lower income job, that's perfectly okay, but we want to focus on the long term to see if there's ways to expand your breathing room over time. Let's assume for the first part of this video, you worked enough to get yourself a little bit of an emergency saving fund, and you have a little bit more time on your hands rather than working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, at this point, I would work on building skills outside of your 9 to 5 that help you build your actual main income. I've poured a ton of hours in mornings and evenings towards expanding my skill set that enabled me to eventually 6x my income from about 50 to 60K to almost 360 in just about 4 years. My 12 to 14 hour days didn't look exactly the same as Brandon Carter's, but I would say that what I did ended up expanding my ability to earn significantly over time. I did a lot of trainings on things like product management, design, software, etc. that really well-rounded my skill set and made me a better employee. I also spend a lot of time listening to professional case studies in my field so that I can broaden my business knowledge. For the scenario he was in, Brandon Carter focused a lot on using physical labor to build his income. But for me, I was working on sharpening my mind and increasing my skills that eventually improved my 9-to-5 salary. Third big idea is to side hustle in the same direction as your main hustle. The reality is that even though you want to improve your main income, you don't want to be entirely dependent on it, because if you lose that job, then you'll go back to square one. A lot of people talk about the idea of a side hustle, which is a simple way to make some degree of money on the side. However, while this is a great thing to think about, you want to make sure that this is something that also contributes to your main goal. If you're still figuring out what your career looks like or what you want to do, it's certainly okay to try a lot of things, but once you have a general sense of direction, you want to make sure that your side hustle actually complements your skill set to build your overall income. For example, if you're trying to land a software engineering job or you are a software engineer, then maybe your side hustle involves tutoring people on software engineering or helping people create their own side projects. That way, even though if it's not the exact same thing, you are still building a complementary skill set. The human brain can only switch context so many times throughout the day before it loses focus. And so you want to make sure your side hustle is something that actually complements your overall skill set so that you're still moving forward in one goal direction. Over the course of time, we want you to build strong expertise and mastery in a specific thing. That's how you'll actually be able to charge a lot more for your skills, whether that's at a job or at your own business. You want to make sure after you're done trying a bunch of different auxiliary things that you have a true direction you're trying to go for. Fourth and final idea is to simplify your investments. We mentioned how with your career, you don't want to spend a ton of time going in lateral progress and instead want to focus your efforts on moving forward in one direction. Investing is kind of the same way. A lot of the times people overcomplicate the process by trying 100 different investment strategies, putting their money into 10 different portfolios across things like crypto, bonds, individual stocks, options, etc. And the reality is they just aren't making that much money to even begin with. So the marginal gain on each individual piece just doesn't add up to be that much. My approach, on the other hand, has been to maximize the amount of time I spend on building my skills as the vehicle for building wealth, rather than maximizing 10% or 5% returns on any individual investment. I keep most of my investments pretty simple for the most part and just buy a simple SPY stock fund that indexes the overall market. Too many people try to do 10 to 15 different things at once, which eventually ends up getting them next to nothing because they've lost some money here, gained some money here, and all they've spent is truly just a lot of time. And really, over 95% of the money that I've invested personally, if you look at the stock over time, it really just goes up. And so if you're in it for the long run, it's going to be hard to lose as long as you just keep pouring money into it. Only once I got past having $100,000 net worth did I really start to experiment and keep a tiny percentage of my wealth in things like crypto and other stocks. And honestly, still, I just pour most of the money into an index fund because most of the other stuff ends up almost either evening out or having a pretty small return. Also, just to be 100% transparent, I do also get some Amazon stocks from my job, a large portion of which I do reinvest into that SPY fund. But the reality is I didn't start getting a ton of those until this year. Most of my compensation came from a cash salary, and really just focused on those basic principles over time. I do also have to tell you that this is not financial advice by any means, but my strategy is just to stick to the basics and focus on building my skills so that I can command more money for what I do, rather than trying to maximize any small investment. Building wealth and getting your first $100,000 doesn't have to be about any crazy schemes, quitting your job, or any investment strategies that you haven't heard of. Sometimes it's just about basic principles and relying on your skills as a mechanism for wealth building. The truth of the matter is you can work hard every day to improve your skills and let the weeks and months be the compounding factor that helps you build over time. If you're interested in growing your skills, I run a small community of founders that you can click the link to find down below for more information on how to build your skills and your wealth. I'll see you in the next video.